You're listening to the weekly Dartscast, and now your co-hosts, one-time UK Open Riley's qualifier participant Alex Moss, and the one-time VIP guest of Barry Hearn, Burton DeWitt. 180! Hello and welcome to a new episode of the weekly Dartscast, sponsored by Dartwolf. I'm Alex Moss, and joining me as always it is the Darts Strava King, the Darts statistician, and no football or soccer to ruin his mood this week. It is Burton DeWitt. How are you doing?
Yeah, no, thankfully not, although the draw just came up for the Cricket World Cup qualifier, and the U.S. got the best group they could get. So I'll be happy with the hope that maybe, just maybe, we could pull 4 upsets and qualify for the World Cup for the first time. How are you, Alex?
Happy days. Yeah, I've got my fingers crossed for that. I'm doing all right, thank you. We've got a busy show lined up for you this week. We've actually got 3 guests, it turns out, for you. We've got the world number one and a world champion, Michael Smith. He's going to be chatting to us as part of the Premier League Media Day. We've also got the Sky Sports commentator, Rod Studd. He's going to help us preview the Premier League playoffs. Plus, for the first time, we've got the man himself, Swiss Stompe, as I've christened him, Marcel Walpen, who makes his European Tour debut in Germany this weekend. But before all of that, we have got the Premier League playoffs on Thursday night. And after 16 consecutive weeks on the road, the season concludes at the O2 in London. 3 of the world's top 4. You've got Michael van Gerwen, Gerwyn Price, and Michael Smith, the world number 1, plus the 2021 Premier League champion, Johnny Clayton. Looking at the lineup, we've got, where does this foursome rank among the best fields we've had for a Premier League finals night?
It has to be up there, based on the fact that you end up with what is probably the 4 best players in the world right now. You know, maybe you could throw Luke Humphries into that conversation as well, although Luke hasn't been quite reaching the heights as last year, but he still made a few Euro Tour finals. He's still a contender every tournament he enters. Of course, though, he wasn't in the Premier League this year. Luke Humphries aside, and maybe Dirk van Dijvenbode aside, these are the 4 best players in the world, with just those other 2 being in the conversation. Johnny Clayton hasn't been as consistent this year, but in the second half of the Premier League season, he's been really good. That's why he played his way in the end. Michael Smith was struggling in the first half of the Premier League, as well as he took to the new role as being the player to beat the world champion, the world number 1. But boy, did he come on strong at the end, winning those 3 nights in a row, beating everyone in the field other than Dimitri Vandenberg across those 3 nights. Michael van Gerwen, and you'll hear this from Rod Studd later as well, he was the dominant force of the Premier League, winning 3 consecutive nights, making a UK Open final. But he hasn't been playing as consistently since then, but he's won a Euro Tour. He's won his share of events. Assuming he's healthy, he's right back in there in that conversation. And then obviously Gerwyn Price, who I think has never been as good as he is now, has never been close to as good as he is right now. And from week 7 on was clearly the best player in the Premier League. That's why he ended up topping the table and being the top seed. It's easy to have recency bias because, well, we only have fresh in our minds what's going on right now. And if you look back in history, there have been some phenomenal Premier League nights, and often as Premier League finals nights, and often it's the most unfancied player that comes through. You know, you look at when Raymond van Barneveld, after losing all those semifinals, finally got through. It was in a field that involved Gary Anderson, Michael van Gerwen, Phil Taylor, that he was able to finally break through. Boy, is that a finals night. And there's been others like that. We do have recency bias. But in terms of the level that all 4 of these are playing at going in, especially when you add in the depth that's in the game right now, that you could say that these very likely are the 4 best players in the world right now. And there's only a couple other people even in that conversation. That's a pretty tough standard for any year to meet. I do think on paper, where these players are, this is the best. The best player in it is not the best entering, because there's been years that Michael van Gerwen or Phil Taylor were playing at a higher level than Gerwyn Price is entering this. But if you go back a month ago, I don't know if that was really the case. And Gerwyn Price isn't that far off of them. But then if you look at number 2, number 3, number 4, they are well ahead of where number 2, number 3, number 4 usually have been for the longest time. These are 4 players, any one of which could lift the title, and it really wouldn't be that much of a surprise. Well, I'm not going to make my prediction now. Give me 10 minutes because we'll be making it soon enough. But as I said, it's on paper 4-way race between 4 very deserving players.
Yeah, it is a really strong lineup. And I was having a think about this earlier when the lineup was confirmed for the O2 and starting off with the rankings, 3 of the world's top 4. That is a good start. You say, why isn't the world number 2 there, Peter Wright? But would you swap Peter Wright in for Johnny Clayton right now on current form and give yourself the top 4, all of them in there? I'd say no. And I think from the 8 players that started this Premier League and how the season has panned out, I think the 4 we've got is arguably the highest quality we could have got from what we've seen. And how does it compare to previous years? I was having a look back, and I think the earliest I'd go to possibly rival it is 2011. And you had Phil Taylor, Raymond van Barneveld, Gary Anderson, Adrian Lewis. And at that point, 3 of those 4 were proven winners in the PDC. You had Adrian Lewis who just won his first world title, beating Gary Anderson in the final. Phil Taylor, Raymond van Barneveld, their resumes speak for themselves. But that was the night that Gary Anderson won his first major in the PDC. He won that Premier League and went on to achieve a lot more. And I really think that the golden period, if you like, for these finals nights, it was around 2013 to 2017. You had Michael van Gerwen come into the mix. James Wade was in there a few times. Dave Chisnall, when he was in, some might say, that the best form of his career and could have won the Premier League in that 2015 finals night. Peter Wright, again, during one of his hot spells, and he'd go on to miss those match starts in 2017 to win the title. And I think as a fan watching that era, those 4 or 5 years, those finals nights, for me, was peak Premier League. And I think the 4 or 5 years after that, I don't think the lineup for the playoffs has been as strong as it was back then. But this year, in my opinion, I think it's the strongest lineup that we've had for a finals night, probably since at least 2017. I think you can make a compelling case for any of those 4 players on Thursday night to walk away with the title at the O2. And okay, 2 of them, they've never won it, and one of them's never been in the playoffs before. But those 2 players, Michael Smith, that's just the world number 1 and world champion, and Gerwyn Price, he's a former world number 1 and world champion, and both of them are multi-time major winners. They are proven winners as well. So the other 2, Michael van Gerwen, he's 1 title away from being standalone the most successful player in the Premier League. Another title would move him on to 7. He's currently level on 6 with Phil Taylor. And then you've got Johnny Clayton, who has snuck in again to that 4th spot for the second time in 3 years. But the other year in between, he finished top. And in his first year, he won the title. So I wouldn't go as far as to say this is the best field we've had for a finals night. But looking back on more recent years, I'd say I'm more intrigued for this finals night than I have been for a good 4 or 5 years. And on paper, going into it, it's definitely got me hooked. And again, genuinely, I know we're going to come on to it in a moment, but I couldn't really say with any confidence who is going to win it.
Well, you're going to have to contradict what you just said, because we need all the confidence in the world now. Prediction time. How do you see the playoffs unfolding? Who wins the 2 semifinals, and who takes home the 2023 Kazoo Premier League title?
Just before I get to that, at a side note, we have mentioned that we have got Rod Studd coming on the show a bit later. And last week on our picks for the finals, the final league night of the season, I did go 3 out of 4. So some might say coming into the playoffs, there is a bit of momentum behind me. But all jokes aside, like I said a second ago, this is so tough to predict. And we put this out as our question of the week for our listeners on Twitter. We've had over 400 votes so far. Do go and vote on the poll. It's still open as the time of recording. And at the moment, a lot of our listeners are pretty confident. They think it's going to be Gerwyn Price. 56% of them going with the Iceman, who finished top of the table. 22% going with Michael Smith. 12% going with Michael van Gerwen, and 10% going with Clayton. And a couple of our listeners tweeting in as well. Boris saying probably Price, hoping for a Smith win though. And Jed128 saying Clayton with a 1-2-1. So he's even given us a finish on how he does it as well. And more on Johnny Clayton's finishing a bit later. But looking at the odds, Gerwyn Price does go in as the favourite with the bookmakers. He's 6-4 in some places. Then you've got Michael Smith at 5-2. Then you've got the 6-time champion Michael van Gerwen at 11-4. And that Price has been stretched out, you'd probably say, as a result of last week's Premier League night in Aberdeen. Van Gerwen won his first game, but visibly was in some discomfort, pulled out of his semi-final with Dimitri van den Berg, who went on to win the night, beating Gerwyn Price in the final. But MVG withdrawing with that arm injury. We did see him go on and play in the Pro Tours on Saturday and Sunday, which tells me he is going to be okay. He is going to be fit to play on Thursday, but there obviously is that concern. What if that injury comes and happens again? Because it did kind of come out of nowhere. He was playing so well in that game with Chris Dobie before the injury flared up. And then lastly, you have got Johnny Clayton in there as a 7-1 outsider. And I think for me, these finals nights, they can be unpredictable. And even though these players have been playing each other for the best part of the last 4 months, form can go out the window. We have seen players finish third or fourth and go on and win the finals night, Johnny Clayton being the most recent of those in 2021. So I'm going to go against the table here. I'm going to go against the majority of our listeners. I'm going to say that Johnny Clayton beats Gerwyn Price in that first semi-final. Then Michael Smith, who finished second ahead of Michael van Gerwen. I couldn't tell you what the difference was. It certainly wasn't points or goal differential. And so I'm going to go with Michael Smith to beat Michael van Gerwen. So we've got a Clayton-Smith final, and I'm going to go with Michael Smith. I think he gets it done. I'm going to go 11-7 to the world number one, and he's going to hold that title as well as the World Championship, the Grand Slam, and now the Premier League all at the same time. Michael Smith is going to be my winner on finals night.
Ooh. Now, before I make my pick, do you think I agree?
I know how much of a Michael Smith fan you are, so I'm going to say yes.
All right. Well, we'll see whether I agree, because if I do agree, then obviously we're both going to be wrong. So that would mean you were wrong in your picks. And if we don't agree, then you were wrong in thinking that we agree. So no matter what, you're wrong. Well, you're wrong because I'm actually going differently, at least in one of the matches, because I think the top seed will win. I think Gezi is just playing too well. Yes, Clayton comes in with the momentum. He won a Players' Championship at the weekend. He's been improving consistently as the year went on. At the beginning of the Premier League season, we were talking, has he regressed? Is it this the year that we start to see him drop off a bit? And it looked for a little while that might have been the case, but he certainly has grown into the season, most encapsulated by winning that Players' Championship title this past weekend. And he comes in playing well, but Gerwyn Price is the best player in the world. He is confident. He is playing brilliantly. And I just don't see even an informed Johnny Clayton being able to beat him on this particular night with all this at stake. Do I agree, though, that Michael Smith will make the final? I'm going to have to, because there's just too many question marks with Michael van Gerwen health-wise right now. Pulled out of the semifinal last week. Didn't play he pulled out of the semifinal in the Premier League, and we don't know where his game is fully at physically entering this. And Michael Smith has been, he won 3 consecutive Premier League nights and beaten Van Gerwen along the way there. I just think he's playing that little bit better right now. And, he only beat him the last time they met in a very meaningful match in the World Final. I think Michael Smith gets the better of him, but I am not going to pick Michael Smith to win the title. This is Gerwyn Price's year in the Premier League. Michael Smith's time will come. We've said that many times, and in some ways it has come. He's won the Grand Slam. He's won the World Championship. He is world number one, but he will not be Premier League champion, not this year at least. It's Gerwyn Price's turn.
Well, those are our picks. Let's hear from one of the players that is going to be playing at the O2. It is the world number one, the world champion. Here's our chat with Michael Smith.
I'm joined today by the world champion, the world number one, and most importantly of all, the reigning U.S. Darts Masters champion, Michael Smith. Michael, how are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Just looking forward to getting going now for tomorrow in the Premier League.
Of course, and we're talking to you, as you mentioned, just 24 hours before you'll be playing in the playoffs at the O2. First time you've made the playoffs since 2018. How are you feeling just a day away?
I feel a lot better than I did 5 years ago. I think that was my first time, and I've been in it twice, I think. So to be in it again now, like where my head is at, like you said, winning the Worlds, the Grand Slam, being world champ. There's a little bit of pressure of that, but it's also, I'm more happy and a lot less nervous than I was 5 years ago. So I'm really looking forward to tomorrow.
Makes sense, and a lot to catch up on. It's the first time we've had you on the show this season as a guest, so we have to mention that little run at the Alley Pally to winning the World Championships. How have these last 4 or 5 months been for you, the first time being the world champion?
I've not really celebrated winning the World, so I've not had time yet. Like, literally 2 days after the Worlds, we was away again, starting the new season. But yeah, it's been busy with interviews, media, pictures, everything. But yeah, I finally lived out my childhood dream of being a world champion, world number one. So to get it and finally realise it, the only problem I've got now is the months are going quicker and quicker. We're just about to hit June, so I've only got about another 6 months left of it unless I win it again.
Of course, and you showed your battling qualities during that run. 3-1 down to Martin Schindler in one of the earlier rounds, came back to win 4-3. In quarterfinals with Stephen Bunting, you said you weren't at your best. At what point during that 3 weeks did you really start to believe that the title was going to be yours?
I think the semi-finals, because like, for me in my head, I know I've only been in 2 beforehand, but I was just telling myself I've never lost in a semi-final, so it was just getting my head right for that. I played Nathan Aspinall, James Wade, and then Gabriel Clements. I know it would have been massive if Gabriel Clements made the final, especially in Germany and all the media attention that would have got. But in that game, I think I couldn't break him, and I think we was 2-2, maybe 3-3, I'm not so sure. Then I finally held form, broke him, and I thought, you know what, it's my year this year. Doing the interviews the day after, the day after the thing, I remember RTL or whoever it was asked me a question. So how do you beat Michael Van Gerwen? And I just said, well, how does he beat me? I said, his last 5 games, he's not dropped a set. He's not felt any pressure. And I said, I've felt every game I've played, it's not been plain sailing, it's not been straightforward. That I've got the determination now, I've got the grit, I've got the scoring power to compete with anyone. If not, they've got to try and compete with me. It was just my doubles in that tournament, the Worlds. My doubles were going fine under pressure. They were going fine, and I just believed it. And then, obviously, the World Final when that leg happened, then I knew it. I said to myself, now Michael knows he's in the game, and I know I can compete with this now. I've just hit the 9 darts after he missed. I know I've got the game, and then I think it was 2-2 maybe, or 3-2 to me. It was 2-0 down. I was 2-0 down, and I checked the 130 out, and he went to walk off stage, and I thought, I've got him. All you got to do now is just play well. Like, keep doing what you're doing, and you'll win. That's all. If you dip and get his confidence back, then you're going to lose. And straight away, there was 2 key moments in that final, and then managed to cross the line.
Well, you mentioned a couple of things we'll talk about. Come back to your doubling in a bit, but you mentioned, of course, that 9-dart leg, possibly the most famous leg in darting history at this point. When did you get a sense that 9-darter would go viral all over the globe like it had? Was it when you hit it, or was it only after the fact when everyone was messaging about it?
No, it's like I knew he was on for a 9, and then I knew I hit it. But obviously I was just focusing on the game, and it wasn't until I got back to my room that night and I was just looking at the trophy, and then I watched the highlights. It was 32 minutes what Sky had put out, so I just watched that, so I didn't watch the full game. And then literally my phone was just going mad and mad and mad, but then I just turned my notifications off, carried on watching it, and then when I checked social media, I was looking and I got tagged in it a few times, and then I heard Mardel's commentary and then saying it was the greatest leg ever. And it just went nuts. So it wasn't until I got to bed that night, it must have been about 12 a.m., 1 a.m. at night, and I realised that he'd missed our date, and it was the perfect, you can never be beaten. And it was weird, but I think that's took a lot of attention away from me actually winning as well. So it's been kind of good and kind of bad as well.
Yeah, I bet. Now, you mentioned your doubling. Before you won your first major at the Grand Slam, the question always came up when you would win the big one. You've now won your last 2 major finals, and in fact, in the last 3, your doubling percentage has been 47%, 50%, and 47%, which is the best 3 you've had in major finals. Have you noticed that you've been more clinical on the finishing?
Yeah, I think it's because I stopped being stubborn. So like my stubbornness would never let me come away from tops when I'm struggling. I'd always stick with 10s, and I think you're seeing more now. I'm going 9 double 8s quite a bit if 10s is not working. I'm leaving 32 a lot, which I never did. Double 8s, I always hit double 8. 62, I've been going treble 18 for double 4 because it's next to each other instead of 42 10s. So I think it was just not being stubborn, and I'm starting to feel it in practice as well, where if I'm not being stubborn, I'm just letting the darts do the talking, not my head. They seem to be working, so I just keep sticking to it.
Yeah, I have noticed that. Now, when you spoke with Alex, you said that at the last day of the Grand Slam, you were at the venue from 9 in the morning and had 3 cans of Red Bull before the final. How many cans did you have the day after winning the World Championships with all those media commitments? Because judging from your Twitter, you didn't have much time for sleep.
Yeah, I think I got to sleep about 4 a.m. in the morning, then I had to be up at 8. So like I felt rough because obviously like when I got back to the hotel, the bar was shut, so I wanted to celebrate. So the bar was shut, but then we had like a little room that you could sit in, or the room service. So I must have had about 10 bottles of beer in there, and I just tried to celebrate. And I went, managed to fall asleep. When I woke up in the morning, I felt kind of a bit edgy, a bit ropey. And I think literally every other drink was either a bottle of water or a Red Bull, and that was in 8 hours. And I was drinking it like it was just like a fish. So I reckon could have been 6-7 cans of that and probably about 4 liters of water.
Yeah, and I think you earned the right to celebrate. Now, even 4 months on from that win, the title is still giving you some special moments. Last week, you and St. Helens Rugby League team were invited for a civic reception to celebrate your achievements in St. Helens. What did that mean for you?
Yeah, it was nice because I remember like when Saints win like the grand final or the Challenge Cup, they go in a bus and have a parade around the town. And when I won the Worlds, I didn't even get asked for nothing. It wasn't like a spite or nothing. I was just more annoyed that some kid from Saints have done one of the greatest achievements ever, like that you can't do in it, like my sport, let alone no one else's sport. And I got nothing, so to be asked to do it, and then I went, it was great, and then I got all my pictures. So like when you come into St. Helens, when you got the sign saying "Welcome to St. Helens," there'll be a picture of me on there with a trophy, and another one will have the Saints team on. So it was nice to be recognised. And then I got a letter saying I'm going to get the freedom of the town. So now I'm going to be awarded like the greatest honour you can get from the St. Helens Council, which is the key to the city. So I get the freedom of St. Helens now, and I'll get that later on in the year.
Now, one experience we're hoping you'll get is an invite onto Celebrity Catchphrase. During the World Championships, you said you like to pass the time between games watching it on television. Is there any update on that yet?
No, I'm good at it when I'm at home, but not under the pressure. Like I was literally watching Supermarket Sweep every day. Catchphrase, like it sounds easy, like say what you see or run around the supermarket, but under the pressure of talking, I'm not the best. So I like to watch. I don't think I could ever go on it.
Now, we'll circle back to the Premier League in a bit, but next week is another big week at the U.S. Darts Masters. And as I said in the introduction, you're the defending champion there in New York. How much are you looking forward to that trip, but this time going as the main man in World Darts?
Yeah, last year it was weird because I literally come out of my hotel, turn left, and it was about 3 or 4 blocks from the square. Where the name is now, but yeah, from wherever it is. But like all old pictures on the billboard, and it was weird. And then walking through the MSG, like that was even more surreal because you got pictures on the wall of who's like fighters who's been there, comedians, singers, everything. And now going back this year, I'm taking the wife and kids, so they're going to experience it as well. And hopefully, like the billboards, if we do have them in Times Square, it's going to be me with the trophy as well. So it's more surreal. And like the MSG, I want it to stay that way because I keep saying it's Michael Smith's garden, not Madison Square Garden. So I just got to get there and defend it as well, hopefully.
So you mentioned how surreal that was. One other question about being world champion. What has been the most surreal thing that you've experienced as world champion?
It's not to me personally. It's just like, when you watch on social media and I'm seeing like my face on Shaq's NBA shows, on the UFC Ariel show, just being like put everywhere. Like I know it's not me personally, but it's videos of me. Just like the whole world recognizing that leg and the win. And yeah, it's been weird, but it's been nice also. It's nice to be recognised and recognised for my achievements as well. Because let's face it, 6 months ago I was branded a bottle job. So now to be branded the world champion, world number one, through the greatest leg of darts ever, yeah, it feels nice. It feels good. Eventually, finally, I get the accolades I think I deserve.
Of course. And one of your media appearances after winning the Worlds was with the American journalist Ariel Helwani, who has invited you to his studio in New York next week for a game he likes to call 3 versus 3, who can score the highest with 3 darts. You going to go easy on him, or are you looking to set a high score and hit a big one, maybe a 180?
I don't know. I might have a practice beforehand, and I'll see. But no, he's been nice. Like, he texts me all the time, and like we literally speak. He said, "Can't wait for me to come into the studio and stuff." It'd be nice to sit down and talk with him, not over phone or Skype. So I just can't wait for it. But if I beat him too hard on the darts, he might not speak to me again or invite me on again. So I might take it easy on him. I might just beat his score by 1 if he goes first.
Now, let's get back to the Premier League and the playoffs back at the O2. It's a venue where you won the World Youth title 10 years ago now, and then, of course, 5 years ago, made your first major final in the Premier League. MVG averaged 112 against you in that one. Now you're back 5 years later, but this time as the world number one. Does it feel like it's come full circle for you?
Yeah, because, say again, 5 years, made my first major. Michael beat me. 5 years ago, I made my first World final. Michael beat me. So now we're in a 5-year cycle where I beat him in the World. So hopefully we get to the Premier League, and who knows? It's the 5-year stint, I guess. But yeah, it's full circle. So I just want to go up there. I think it's 20,000. I just want to showcase what I've got. I know if I play bad, I get beat. I'll make sure I'm in the Premier League next year, and hopefully I'm back. But if I win it, I'll be on course for the Triple Crown. There's only been Phil and Michael do it, who wins the Worlds, the Premier League, and the match play in 1 year. So, yeah, there's a lot riding on tomorrow. And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. I've still got a lot of time to make it happen as well.
Well, you mentioned that on track for the Triple Crown, but it's after you won the Worlds and became number one, you joke that you've completed darts. Only two players, of course, have won the Triple Crown. Only 3 have won the Worlds and the Premier League alone in the same year. So what would it mean, though, to add your name to that list on Thursday night?
It would be nice. If it's not, it's not. But then, like I said, I've still got a lot of time to do it. And for me, I have completed darts because I can't get to 0. So I've completed by being number one, and I completed by being world champion. Now, I think that's what got in my head for a couple of months. As you see in the Premier League, I didn't play particularly well. And it was about, listen, I know you're world champion, you might be world number one, but why don't you become like a multiple world champion and then become the Premier League champion, the match player? So why don't you try to win everything on the calendar, and then you will have completed it? So that's me aim now, is every tournament the PDC holds, I want to win. I've won the World Series, I've won a European, I've won Pro Tours, I've won the Slam and the match player. So now and I won the youth as well. So now it's about winning the other tournaments, that the TV tournaments they've got to offer now. And then I think there'll be another video of me in Vegas once I've done it, saying now I've actually completed it.
Well, good luck in the Premier League. Good luck pushing through to truly complete darts.
Thank you very much.
Thanks again to Michael for joining us now, moving away from the Premier League into the next event that's going to be on Sky after this week, and it is the World Cup of Darts. It is the final week before the cut-off for the World Cup, where we've got more than 3/4 of the 80-player field now set for Germany. But which of the confirmed teams so far are catching your eye?
Yeah, and I'll just mention, I mean, I assume our listeners know, but just in case, like some of the ones that aren't confirmed yet, England, Michael Smith will be there, assuming he wants to, and he'll be joined by Rob Cross unless Luke Humphries wins the title in the Euro Tour this weekend. The Northern Irish team is still a 3-way race potentially. If Josh Rock beats Dale Gurney in the finals, both of them would jump Brendan Dolan. Just a couple others. Teams are still not to be confirmed, but of the ones that we do know for sure, have to start with the defending champions, Australia. They were phenomenal last year, and Damon Hedda is finally getting into gear this season. I think he had a bit of a slow start, but we've seen him make some quarterfinals and semifinals on the Euro Tour, been outshadowed by his walk-ons on the Euro Tour, but don't let that distract from just how good he's playing right now. But Simon Whitlock has also been playing pretty well. Right now, he's the first man out for the World Match Play and the first man out for the World Grand Prix. So he's right there in the thick of getting back in those televised events. A lot of that was the good form he took out of the World Cup last year. He hasn't been as consistent at the start of this year as he was at the end of last year, but he wasn't playing that great entering the World Cup. He took so much from that World Cup title, and I think he relishes playing for Australia, and it was the kickstart for his 2022 season. Maybe it'll be the kickstart for 2023. They will be a force, those two, because, well, on their day, they're both still fantastic players, but Damon Hedda playing great right now, and Whitlock always lifts his game for his country. Some others, though, that jump out, got to give a mention to Team Scotland. Peter Wright playing a bit better right now. Gary Anderson playing the best he's played in a few years. That could be a very under the radar. It's weird thinking about Peter Wright and Gary Anderson being under the radar, but assuming Gary shows up, and he's played the Euro Tour a couple of times this year, so maybe he will. A very interesting pairing, because they're not going to be getting that talk, but maybe they're just going to hit their stride at the right time this year. Shout out for Team Canada, Matt Campbell. We don't talk about him that much, but he's a player who I do think he'll win a title, if not this year, then next year. He's very difficult, and when he's playing well, he is almost unbeatable. And it's not just a match. He can string together 4, 5, 6 good matches. And playing with Jeff Smith, who still hasn't really rebounded from all the lost play from COVID, but Jeff Smith on his day will be good. And one thing that our listeners might not realize, but there's always been a lot of pairs play in North America. I don't know the Canadian game as much as the U.S. game, but I assume both of these players have grown up playing quite a bit of pairs action, and being all pairs, I think, will be a benefit to Team Canada, as it will be for the U.S. team in the World Cup. Do I want to say any others, or do I want to leave at least one team for you to talk about? I'll say one more. I'll go with the Filipino team. We haven't seen Christian Perez yet this year as he works on his visa, but he is a tour card holder. And of course, Lawrence Ilagan, player who was always dangerous, and I do think we'll eventually see him have a breakthrough. Maybe he'll go to Q School one year. Maybe he'll win a few matches at the World Championships. But I think that's a really tricky pair, and it's a pair that if they come in playing hot, I don't just think they could win a match. I think they can go pretty far. I think they can make it to the final day, because both of them individually are very good players, and combined, they'll be a very formidable team.
Some good picks there, and at the time of recording, I think we're up to 29 of the 40 teams. We know the full 2-player lineup, and we've had a few rumours on some of the teams who the players are going to be, but nothing confirmed for those yet. One of them is 99%, but we're until we get 100%, we don't want to go and say they're definitely going to be in the field. But you did mention a couple of the teams that we're going to know by the end of this week. The England team, who's going to partner Michael Smith. Is it going to be Rob Cross, who we had a Rob Cross appreciation minute at the weekend, him winning one of the Players' Championship titles on Saturday? Is it going to be him, or is it going to be Luke Humphreys? And then, as you mentioned there, with the Northern Ireland team, it's going to be interesting to follow, and could be draw dependent, because if the draw comes out and Daryl Gurney's on the same half as Josh Rock, then Brendan's booking his flight. He hasn't got to worry about following any of those games. But I've got to say, there are a lot of teams which have caught the eye, and a few of them that you mentioned there, of course, the defending champions, Damon Hedda, Simon Whitlock. I'm interested to see how they get on, and Peter Wright, Gary Anderson. And we understand it is going to be those two again. The PDC, they've not confirmed it, but earlier in the year, Gary did suggest in one of his interviews that he would accept an invite this year. Last year, he did step aside so that John Henderson could try and defend the title with Peter Wright. But this year, it seems like he's going to be involved again, and they've not played together, Peter and Gary, since 2019 when they won the title. But their record is pretty impressive. They've been together 5 times. They've made the final in 3 occasions, which tells me that if they are back involved again, they are going to be a force to be reckoned with. So we wait to see if that one's going to be confirmed pretty soon. But looking away from those, and how about a new pairing for this year? Willie O'Connor, who's one of the ever-presents in the World Cup. He's going to be with a new player this year, Keane Barry, and those two pretty close in the rankings now. I think it's just 3 places between them, only 10 grand separating them for that Irish number 1 spot that Willie O'Connor's held for such a long time. But Keane Barry is now the Irish number 2, replacing Steve Lennon. He is going to be making his debut in the tournament. Again, Ireland, we've seen O'Connor and Lennon make the final before. They could be a potential dark horse this year, we'll see. And as we have gone up to 80 players in the field, we've gone up from 32 to 40 countries involved. I'm looking forward to seeing some of the new teams and some teams that we've not seen for a while. And last week on the show, Sudesh Fitzgerald, him winning that qualifier to get Guyana a debut in the tournament. You've also got Ukraine, Bahrain, Iceland, some of those teams that we don't know the lineup. India, they've not been involved since 2015. We've got Prakash Jiwa and Nitin Kumar. They've both been in World Championships in the past. They're going to be teaming up. And one team that we've not had confirmed yet, but we're expecting it to be the players that are on that order of merit. And it's, again, another team that's back in the field, first time since 2014. And many people have wanted them involved for the last few years. And that's France. You've got Jacques Labre and Thibaut Tricol. If it's going to be those two, they could be a pair to watch out for as well.
Well, we'll see. Some of those might even be confirmed by the time you're all listening to this. But now we'll move on, though, to our second of 3 interviews on this week's show, and it's with the Sky Sports commentator Rod Studd. I'm joined today by Sky Sports commentator Rod Studd. Rod, how are you?
I'm great, thanks. How are you doing? Thanks for having me on.
Yes, I'm doing well and glad to have you on. We're talking now only 2 days before the Premier League playoffs at the O2. Gerwyn Price topping the group stage, joined by Michael Smith, Michael Van Gerwen, and Johnny Clayton, all 4 of whom are vying for the title. But who would you say has the, to use your favorite word, momentum going into the playoffs?
Stop it, Burton. Stop it. I haven't got a clue who'll win. I mean, nobody's got any clue who's going to win any of these things. And we all have a guess, don't we? That's all we ever do. But if I were to put it in just in basic percentage terms, I'd have it as like 40% Price, 25% Smith, 25% Van Gerwen, 10% Clayton. So make of that what you will. Now, in terms of who's got the momentum, well, I mean, difficult to tell because several of them have had the momentum at various times, haven't they? You see, this is the thing about momentum. It comes and goes without anybody knowing why or when. It's just the ebbs and flows of sport, isn't it? That's why I don't like it. But like the term, early on you'd have said Van Gerwen was favourite, wouldn't you, in the first few weeks when he had that great run in weeks 4, 5 and 6 in particular. And then certainly Price, having demolished Van Gerwen in Newcastle in the final, was the man to beat. And then there was a late rally from Smith, wasn't there, when he won 3 nightly rounds in consecutive weeks towards the end, to assume the mantle as being the man in form. And then you could even argue a case for Clayton, couldn't you? You could say he shouldn't even be in the finals or may not have been in the finals. And then it was his Welsh mate, Gerwyn Price, who got him through by beating Aspinall. And I suppose now Price is thinking, he might be thinking, what have I done at the end of the semi-final if Clayton were to knock him out? So there's all sorts of narratives floating around, isn't there? And then when you factor in what we don't know is how fit Van Gerwen is with the shoulder injury that forced him to pull out of the semi-final against Vandenberg in Aberdeen. And only Michael really knows how fit he is. And maybe only Michael will really know when he throws his first dart against Michael Smith in the semi-final. So that's just a mystery, isn't it? That's pure conjecture. We don't know how fit Van Gerwen is. And it just adds another ingredient into the mystery, which is who will win the 2023 Premier League finals.
Well, we'll come back to the Premier League later, but there's lots to catch up on since we last had you on the show, and it was during the 2022 World Championship, which is almost 18 months ago now. We saw Peter Wright go on to become a 2-time world champion, but a year later it was Michael Smith crowning himself world champion, reaching the top of the sport. How do you feel Michael's adjusted to life as a world champion so far this year?
Yeah, I remember being on then, and it was... he was playing absolutely beautifully, Peter Wright, wasn't it, at the back end of that 22 finals, and as we remember, outlasted Michael Smith in a really good final. And then Michael Smith outlasted Van Gerwen in another good final 12 months later. Michael Smith, well, the narrative is that he won the Grand Slam and he's become a different player. I don't think that's true. I think he was always an elite level player, and he was a terrific player even when he was losing finals. He just happened to lose largely against players that were above him, or most people would think we're better than him. The standout match when people, this horrible term, I don't like it at all, this bottler term, and, choke and all this stuff. And it really is just a way of abusing another human being. And I don't like it at all. But the one where he really got that leveled at him was when he lost to Danny Noppert, when neither player played very well. And Smith went in as a strong favourite and got beat. But that happens in sport sometimes. So what I think we've seen is that Michael Smith's results have started to match his performances. He played brilliantly in that final against Michael van Gerwen. And I was delighted to see him win. He's a nice guy. He's a lovely guy. He's got a lovely family. And it was brilliant to see him win. And I hated the way he was getting abused for losing a few finals. And I was always pretty confident it would come right in the end. As long as he kept turning up and doing his bit and playing at the level he was playing at, eventually the results would follow. And that's what's happened. So I'm delighted to see him win. He's conducted himself very well. I think he's a good world champion for darts. He's a good ambassador for darts. And to be fair, the sport of darts has lots of good ambassadors. Previous world champions like Michael van Gerwen are very good ambassadors for the sport as well. And Michael Smith's no exception. So he's playing very well. He didn't start in the Premier League too well, did he? He had a good World Series, but the Premier League, it was a slow start. But, to me, it was always likely that Van Gerwen, Price and Smith would be 3 of the 4 qualifiers. So I'm not surprised to see Michael Smith there. He's got a good record against Van Gerwen, not just that World Championship final. So I think he's got plenty of chance of reaching the final of this as well and going on to have a very successful year as we approach some of the big tournaments, the World Match Play coming up in July, then the Grand Prix, Grand Slam, and of course the big one for Smith is going to be putting up a strong defence of his World Championship in December and January as we move to the Alexandra Palace.
Now, of course, you mentioned that a lot of the talk that Michael Smith faced leading up to that was completely unfounded, and I think that was best shown with that immortal leg of darts in the world final when he was already a set down, and if he didn't win that leg, was going to go 2 sets down, and all he did was throw a 9-darter after Michael van Gerwen missed the double for the 9-darter himself. What did you think when you were watching that leg?
Well, I mean, pretty much the same as everyone else I'd imagine, but I could barely believe what I was watching. I mean, it was the most incredible leg, wasn't it? And of course, Stuart and Wayne added to it with the commentary, and Wayne couldn't speak, and it was just great fun, wasn't it? And it wasn't just a great darting moment; it was a great sporting moment, and one that we're going to remember for a very long time. And I'm sure Michael Smith will never forget it. But it was just an incredible moment of sporting drama, the likes of which we haven't seen before, and we're probably unlikely to see it again. But you never know these days with the standard of these players. We've seen some Premier League matches when Michael Smith looked like he was going to get a 9-darter almost every leg. And we know that Gerwin Price is more than capable, and Van Gerwen. So any of these players could throw a 9-darter in at any time. And it was just a great moment. To be in the arena was fantastic. I was on my sofa, but I was just gobsmacked, and my jaw was dropping as I watched. I couldn't believe what I was watching, but it was magical. And something to remember very fondly. And, it's great that, it's recorded for posterity. We can see it over and over again. And I'm sure before Van Gerwen plays Smith in the Premier League semi-final, we'll be treated to a few more reruns and we can enjoy it over and over again.
Definitely. And you mentioned the line from Wayne Mardell, "I can't speak," a nod to the rugby commentator Mick Morgan. You said at the time that you hoped Mick had seen it. Do you know if Mick has seen that commentary yet and what his reaction was?
Yeah, he has, yeah. Well, I mean, Wayne very kindly rang Mick a couple of days later to sort of credit him with the line, and Mick enjoyed that. And I know Mick quite well from watching the rugby league and being down at Casford watching games in his company, and he's a lovely man, a very funny man, and he would have been absolutely delighted that his famous "I can't speak" line had made it onto darts and not just immortalised in rugby league. And you can find it on YouTube. There's a game between Casford and Wigan if you want to hear the full unedited version of "I can't speak" and various other choice words from Morgie. You can find it on YouTube. It's a good watch. Some of it's quite funny, and I hope Wayne doesn't use some of the language that Mick used. Otherwise, we could be in serious trouble on Sky Sports because some of it was a little bit fruity. But it's great stuff, and I know Mick enjoyed it, and Wayne enjoyed throwing it into the commentary. And as I say, it's become immortalised, hasn't it? It's part of darting folklore now.
Of course, and sticking with your Sky Sports colleague, Wayne Mardell, he recently turned the big 5-0, and even before that, we know he would often get asked if he would come back to play in the World Seniors. He's already told us he won't, but have you managed to ask him from the Big 5-0?
Well, I like to wind him up about various things, but I know that subject is pretty much not to be in the forefront, to be off limits, really. And I thought that he might just be tempted to have one last wander down memory lane to the Circus Tavern, because he loved it there. We all did, but Wayne particularly, because it's local to him, and his friends and family used to come and cheer him on when he was playing at the tavern. And I thought it might just be possible that he might have one last trip down to the tavern, but he's always said no. And there's only so many times he can repeat the same thing, isn't it? To be fair to him, so I think that ship has sailed now, and he's not going to do it. And as he says himself, he's not good enough often enough. And he doesn't like all the anxiety. He loves being part of the game of darts and watching it from the commentary box. And he loves being part of the exhibition circuit, where he's such a great entertainer and such a big draw of crowds. But I don't think he just doesn't want that competitive, darts anymore. And he doesn't want the anxiety of it. He doesn't want the pressure. And he's quite happy doing what he's doing. And, at the end of the day, it's down to Wayne, isn't it? And I know we'd all love to see him play again, but it's Wayne's decision. I think we should all respect it.
Can't argue with that. Well, this is the first time that we've had you on the show since the World Seniors has taken off with their events on TV. We've had 2 World Championships in the books now. What have you made of the Seniors so far?
Yeah, I've enjoyed it, Alex. Yeah, I mean, I'm a big nostalgia buff. I mean, some people say nostalgia isn't what it used to be, but for me, I love it. I love a bit of nostalgia. Anything that's takes us back to the days when we were younger makes us feel a bit younger now, and that's why I enjoy that. And there's been, I've enjoyed watching it. Robert Thornton has been brilliant in those 2 World Championships, but I've enjoyed a lot of it. It's been good to see some of the old giants of the sport, strutting their stuff again. Phil Taylor hasn't been what we may have expected, and that may have been because he wasn't playing enough competitive darts. And there's been opportunities for the other players to play competitive stuff, hasn't there? Modus stuff and get their arm into the swing of things. And Phil maybe came in a little cold to that first World Championship particularly. But, it's been good to see people like Kevin Painter, Bob Anderson, Keith Geller throwing darts again. And Robert Thornton has been, superb in those 2 World Championships. So I've enjoyed it. And I know we've seen other tournaments as well, haven't we? Masters and what have you, and match play. And the last one was good because, I enjoy watching Lenny Gates, as I think most of us do, don't we? So it's great to see him winning one of them, the last one. And, he's great value wherever he plays. But, at the moment, the seniors seems to be just growing and growing, isn't it? And as you might say, it's gaining a little bit of momentum. So we'll see how it transpires and how it develops over the coming months and years.
Of course. And we'll now move back to the PDC. And already this season, we've had one ranking major already completed with the UK Open. And Andrew Gilding, as everyone thought, went on to win the title, beating MVG in a last leg final. For you, though, where does Andrew's win rank among the most surprising major winners in the history of the game?
That's a good question. Well, it's going to be pretty high up in it, I would have thought, in terms of betting odds. And especially having beaten the red-hot favourite Van Gerwen in the final. I mean, if Kirk Shepard had beaten John Part, that would have put the Tinners on everything. He would never have topped that. I shouldn't mention Kirk Shepard just in case Mardell is listening. But if Shepard went off 1,000 to 1 to win that 2008 World Championship when he was barely a household name in his own household. So that would have been the tin lid on everything. But obviously John Part put an end to that. He doesn't like these kind of fairy tale nonsense. So Part beating him in the final, put an end to that. Gilding, certainly, right up there as a big upset, I would say, in and amongst all the great darting upsets we've seen over the years. And certainly would be amongst them, no doubt about that. And it was great to see, wasn't it? I think Dan Dawson's still celebrating. Don't think the champagne has quite been finished in the Dawson household after the Gilding fanboy watched his man beat Michael Van Gerwen at the UK there down in Minor. So it was a great performance by Gilding and great fun, and more power to him.
Yeah, I don't blame Dan for that. And away from Andrew Gilding, the last 4 months of televised darts has been dominated by the Premier League, as it usually is at this time of the year. This was the second year that we've had the new format of the nightly tournaments, 2 years in now. What have you made of it? And do you think we'll get a third run of it next year, or do you think we'll try something else for 2024?
I think it'll be the same format next year. I don't know anything. I'm just guessing. But, I mean, I've enjoyed it. You know, I've talked to people who've gone to the venue, who go as punters to the venue, and they've said they thoroughly enjoyed it. They enjoyed it more because there was a definitive conclusion. Somebody won, and there was like, you know, a trophy lift at the end of every one. But there was somebody won, and someone was on the podium, if you like, at the end of every tournament. They enjoyed that. I mean, the thing is with the Premier League, all the people involved in it, the stakeholders, if you want to use the jargon, have got a different thought process about what they're watching. So the people who go on the night have a different view from those watching live on Sky Sports on their sofa, who might have a different view from the broadcaster, Sky Sports themselves, or the Premier League run by the PDC. The PDC might have a different view of what they're looking to achieve, and so might the players. So there's a lot of stakeholders with different views. And I'm sure the PDC, you know, are far cleverer than I am about organising these events, will, you know, seek to get information and views from all those stakeholders before they decide what they're going to do for the next year. But I think the consensus of opinion is that it will be the same format in 2024. I think it's been pretty successful, and particularly this year, I've enjoyed it. You know, it's been good from week one when Chris Dobey won in Belfast, and that was great. And, you know, right through to the last knockings in Aberdeen when it went right down to the wire as the competition would dictate, with 4 out of 8 qualifying for the playoffs, whether Clayton or Aspinall would reach the final. So I think it's been a very successful 2023 Premier League, and hopefully it'll be a successful finals night too at the O2 when we get there in the next couple of days.
Well, speaking of successful, it was definitely a successful Premier League campaign for Gerwyn Price as he joined a short list of players to top the Premier League table. And it's, in fact, the first time he's even managed to finish in the top 4 to qualify for the playoffs after a couple previous 5th place finishes. What do you think has clicked for Price in the Premier League this year?
Well, he was unlucky one year when he was ruled out with a positive COVID test, wasn't it? So that ruled him out. And then the first year he was in it, he just couldn't get going at all for whatever reason. And, you know, I remember him posting on social media that, you know, he didn't want anything to do with it, and it was a terrible competition. It was awful. But, you know, I think the difference is for any professional sportsman, if they start winning, they start to enjoy it. You know, that's what sportsmen and women do for a living. They win sports matches. And if they win, they enjoy it. And if they lose, there's not much enjoyment to be had. You know, people have said that a lot about Anderson, haven't they? Oh, well, he's playing well because he's enjoying it. I think he's actually enjoying it because he's playing well and winning. You know, and I think Price is probably still improving as a player and getting better. You know, we can see that from his ranking and his prize money. He's gradually improving for whatever reason. The more he plays the game, the better he's getting at it, I suspect. And the more he plays at an elite level against elite level opponents, the better he's getting. And he's beating elite level opponents, he's winning tournaments, and he's enjoying it as a consequence. And to be honest, over the Premier League campaign, he finished top and deserved to finish top. I think he was the best player over the Premier League campaign. That's why he finished top. And at the moment, in darts, I think we've got 3 players at the top. We want to call it the Tungsten Trinity of Price, Smith, and Van Gerwen, who will, you know, waver around between ranks 1 and 3 in my mind over the next few months, and they'll swap places like a game of musical chairs. They're the best 3 players. I don't want to be rude to Peter Wright, and I yield to no one in my respect for Peter Wright, and he can come again. But just at the moment, Peter's having a bad patch, isn't he? So at the moment, those 3 are the best players, and I think Price at the moment is the best player. Now, we can all make up a reason why he's got better, but I just think he's just improving as a player. But the more he plays, and the more he plays at elite level competition, he's just getting better and better as a darts player. And that tends to happen over time to some players. Of course, eventually every player reaches the peak of their career and then starts to go down the other side of the mountain and go into decline. But I think we're safe to say that Gerwyn Price is a long way off that yet. Certainly fast approach, I think, the peak of his powers in brilliant form.
Well, you talked about the Tungsten Trinity. We've also got Johnny Clayton in the playoffs on Thursday. They've all had their moments during the season winning these nightly titles. But how different is the atmosphere on finals night compared to all the other weeks, given that all the last 16 weeks of playing and travelling, it all comes down to just that one night to decide who is going to be the Premier League champion?
Well, that's right. I think the atmosphere has been brilliant throughout the competition so far, really. The 16 nights, I think we've had some cracking nights. I think Newcastle was one of the standouts for sure. Anytime Chris Dobey comes onto Local Hero, I think he's absolutely fantastic. I know Chris was blown away by it. And that was the night that Gerwyn Price annihilated Van Gerwen in the final with one of the standout performances. We saw Dobey whitewash Van Gerwen, the most astonishing result, I think, of the entire tournament. That was in Nottingham. Dobey winning in Belfast. And then all the excitement in Aberdeen when Clayton qualified by the skin of his teeth just ahead of Nathan Aspinall. So, yeah, but it all gets stepped up a notch at the O2 Arena. And I'm glad we're back at the O2 because that has become the traditional home of the Premier League finals night, and we haven't been there for a finals night since 2019 when Van Gerwen beat Rob Cross in the final. So that is good to be back there. There was a couple of years behind closed doors due to the COVID situation. Then, due to events getting shifted around the calendar, the sojourn in Germany, in Berlin last year, where of course Van Gerwen won for the 6th time, and Joe Cullen missed by millimetres to take the title by missing double 16. So the atmosphere will be ratcheted up. It'll be a great night, and there's 2 very good semi-finals, the all-Welsh tie between Clayton and Price, and then a repeat of the World Final between Smith and Van Gerwen. So much to look forward to.
And we'll finish with a couple questions about you. You posted on Twitter last week that it's been 3 years since your stroke in May 2020, and you thanked everyone for the support and you wanted to keep looking forward to enjoying each day. So what have these last few years been like for you as you've worked yourself back to doing the job you love and commentating again?
Well, thanks for asking, Burton. Yeah, there's been a lot of challenges, and there's still challenges, and I'm still doing a lot of physio and rehab and trying to get better and trying to move forward and keep enjoying what's going on in life. And it's a bit of a cliche to say you've got a new perspective, and I wouldn't quite go that far, but I do enjoy each day and realise that I might not have been here without trying to sound too melodramatic or get too emotional, but it's been good and I've really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed the last 3 years and all the challenges that have gone with it, and I've really enjoyed getting back to the darts, and my friends and colleagues at Sky Sports have helped me get back there, and it's been brilliant and I've really enjoyed it. And to go back to the O2 and watch these Premier League finals will be a big, big thing for me, and I'm going to look forward to it.
Glad to hear it. And just lastly, the Premier League wraps up this week. You're going to be there. Then we've got the World Cup followed by the World Match Play, both going to be on Sky. What's in the diary for you for these next few months? Are you going to be working on those events as well? And is there a chance we might see you commentating on some of the Pro Tours coming up as well?
I'll be at the World Cup in Frankfurt. I'm very much looking forward to the Match Play because, like a lot of people in professional darts, it remains my favourite tournament. I love going to the Winter Gardens. I think it's an absolutely magical place, and it's produced some of the greatest matches we've seen in professional darts. So I'm very much looking forward to that and the World Cup in Frankfurt. There's a Pro Tour in Leicester just before the World Match Play, so I'll be going down there to do some work on that, which I'm looking forward to because that's a good. Just like the players, it's good to have a run out before the big one, and I'm looking forward to that. I've enjoyed doing the Pro Tours with Mark Webster and Dan Dawson and the rest of the team, and that's been a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to doing some more of that. So I'll be keeping busy, and all the tournaments come thick and fast, don't they? There's not much of a break for the players or the broadcasters in professional darts now. They come thick and fast, and that's the way we like it.
Well, Rod, best of luck in those events, and hopefully have you back on sometime soon, and thank you.
That'd be my pleasure. Thanks for asking me to come on. I've enjoyed it.
Attention all dart enthusiasts, this is ZR, your host from In the Mud Sports, and I have an exciting announcement for you. Are you ready to take your darting experience to the next level? Introducing In the Mud Sports, the premier online darts league for amateurs like yourself. We're not your typical darts league, it's an experience like no other. It's where you can showcase your skills, make new friends, and have an absolute blast. We have a vibrant community where camaraderie is key and darts meets pure enjoyment. Whether you're a singles player or love the excitement of team events, In the Mud Sports has got you covered. We are perfect for amateurs who want to have fun and improve their game along the way. It is your time to shine. Don't miss out on this incredible opportunity to elevate your darting experience and join 80 plus players from all around the world. Together we'll create unforgettable moments on and off the Yoki. You can catch all updates about where we are going live next through Twitter and Instagram at In The Mud Sports. See you guys there.
Thanks to Rod for joining us. It's been a while since we've talked about goings-on over the WDF, but last week there was some news that the WDF have extended their deadline on whether the World Masters will go ahead this year. Originally, they said they'd make a decision by the end of March. Now they've pushed it forward another month to the end of June. Do you think it will be held, in 2023?
It is up in the air at the moment with regards to the World Masters, and we had Nick Rolls, the Secretary General of the WDF, on our show back in February, and we asked him about the World Masters, will it be held this year? And he said back then they've given themselves a deadline for the end of March. That, of course, has passed now. We're into May, and I've made a few inquiries with Nick and the guys at the WDF, and they've come out with the statement at the weekend that they're going to give it a little bit more time until the end of June. They want to keep those conversations open for as long as possible, give themselves every chance of getting the event on this year. And at the same time, that is good to hear, but the longer you wait, and this is a problem that the WDF, other organisations have had in the past, is you keep pushing those deadlines back, the shorter period of time you've got left once that event is confirmed and announced for players to arrange their travel, hotels, and also from a promotional side of things to build that event up, get it promoted and get more interest in it. So the new deadline, end of June, I imagine we're not going to see the event scheduled for the summer, July or August. Then you're going into September. You've got the WDF World Cup at the end of that month, which is a big event for them. So I think if we do see it this year, we are looking beyond September and looking at the WDF calendar. There's not a lot of free weekends if you don't want to clash with one of the events that they've got going on around the world. But they do have a free weekend at the end of October, which is when, funnily enough, the last World Masters under the BDO was held, and I remember that was on the same weekend as the PDC European Championship, so there was a clash there in terms of people watching it on TV. And you look at this year, if they were to host it at the end of October, there would be that clash with the Challenge Tour, which is that's going to be more of an impact, isn't it? Because you've got players involved in the Challenge Tour that would play in the World Masters, you'd imagine. And I think in terms of the WDF, their standpoint, this event, they want to get a big field of players involved, because you look to last year, they got the World Masters back on for the first time in 3 years, first time that they've looked after it since the demise of the BDO, and they had close to 600 players across all the events, which was good to see. And if you put it on the same weekend as the Challenge Tour or one of your other events that's going on, it is going to impact that number. So I don't think there's a lot of options left for the WDF as far as 2023. Are we looking maybe towards the start of 2024, maybe a first quarter, getting it on early in the year? I think it's difficult to say. I think we've seen with the World Championships that has moved from April to December, and that is why we have got this clash with the World Masters dates from last year. But that is a long gap, a year and 8 months between Lakeside. So we know that the WDF, they're not worried about doing that, leaving long gaps between these events and when they're running them. And if it does benefit them in the long run, then it's a good move. For me, if I was in charge, I'd leave this year. I'd split it up. I'd have the World Championships. They've moved that to December, as I've said. I'd put the World Masters in June, put it in a June slot, and then you split the two of them up quite nicely. It gives you a nice amount of time between both the events, the two big events on the calendar, to build up towards them. And where we are now, we've not got anything confirmed for the World Masters. So I think giving themselves that extra bit of time, a little bit like they've done with the World Championship, I think could benefit them in the long run.
There's a lot of questions over on the WDF side. Obviously, already with the World Championships, in essence, being canceled for a year, you could say they postponed it from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, but that in essence is a 1 year cancellation. Now there's the question whether the World Masters will go on, and obviously some of it almost certainly has to do with struggling to get adequate sponsorship and television and other forms of marketing and revenue. We don't know the exact specifics because, well, they haven't announced them, but you have to assume that if they had all of that in place, there wouldn't be any question about whether it would be going ahead. Ticket sales are key in getting a getting a sellout crowd would be nice, but that is only part of the equation, and the other equation hasn't been announced either. So I just don't know. I remember we were saying a few years ago whether the WDF was making the right call in going for a World Championships and not just trying to make the World Masters as good as they can. And as you mentioned, they got over 600 people last year, but the prize fund was still very small. What if instead they put all of their put everything into making the World Masters the marquee event, making it, I mean, it is the oldest major in darts, but making it the one WDF event that really was what they were focusing on, as opposed to splitting between that and the World Championships. Yes, that would mean you'd either have to decide, do you play it all at the circuits, at the Lakeside, or do you forego the history of the Lakeside? And maybe you would have had to forego the history, because I don't think you could put on a full World Masters there. But although they have in the past, they decided to go with the World Championship. They decided to try to split an ever dwindling share of revenue between two events, and it doesn't seem like it has been working. I don't know whether the World Masters will go on. I think they made the right call by delaying another month, and certainly made the right call by at least coming forward and saying we haven't made a decision yet, instead of keeping everyone in the dark, like some organizations have in the past, namely the BDO. But it is getting a little late. I like your idea. If you're going to go with these two, maybe waiting until March or April and just skipping 2023 makes a bit of sense. The one credit for the WDF that we've consistently given is that they have almost always waited until they were sure that everything was in place before they announced that the event was going on. That took a bit of a hit when they had to delay the World Championships by 11 months. Sometimes things didn't go according to plan because of the COVID pandemic, and you can't fault anyone for that. But for the most part, they've done a good job about making sure everything was in a line before making an announcement, and coming and being forthright and saying we haven't decided yet to ease and allay some of the fears, I think was good. But I agree with you. It seems that they're running out of time. And if they're running out of time, what more will 1 month buy them? Just less time to do what is already seeming like a monumental ask.
And do get in touch. Let us know your thoughts on the World Masters. Would you like to see it held sometime before the end of 2023, or would you like to see it, like I've said, sometime in the middle of 2024? Or maybe like Burton has suggested, do they put the two events together, the World Masters and World Championship, and run with one? Let us know your thoughts. We'll be back to answer some of your listener questions in a moment, but let's get to our final guest on the show. Looking forward to this one. He is going to be making his debut on the European Tour this weekend. Here's our chat with Marcel Walpen. I'm pleased to say I'm joined by one of the debutants on the European Tour this weekend, Marcel Walpen. Thanks for the time, Marcel. How are you doing?
Ja, ich bin happy, dass ich das erreicht und freue mich schon auf die kommende Zeit, die kommt. He says he's very happy because of the achievement of the Euro qualifier, and he's looking forward for the next few weeks.
We're also joined by Mark Inhelder, one of the co-founders of the Swiss Darts Corporation, who's going to be helping us with the translating for Marcel. Thanks for joining us as well, Mark. How are you doing?
Thanks, Alex, for having me. I'm very good. How are you?
Doing good, thank you. And before we get to Marcel, a quick word with you, Mark, and I want to get your reaction to the exciting news for Swiss Darts recently that the European Tour is going to be coming to Switzerland next year. How excited are you and everyone on the dart scene in Switzerland to see the PDC come to Zurich in 2024?
Well, that was like the missing piece we were looking for. That's obviously fantastic news for us, for Swiss Darts Corporation, for Swiss Darts in general, and I think that's maybe the beginning of a darts hype in Switzerland, or at least I hope so. And we are all looking forward to the event next year in Zurich.
Definitely. Well, let's get back to Marcel, and we're talking at the start of the week, which will see him make that big stage debut in the PDC, the European Darts Grand Prix in Sindelfingen this weekend. How is he feeling ahead of making that walk onto the stage on Friday?
Ich bin sicher aufgeregt. Also ich werde sehr viel Spass haben. Ich bin aufgeregt und ich nehme einfach alles mit, wo ich kann. Ich bin da zum Lehren, zum Weiterkommen. Ja, ich freue mich einfach nur auf den Tag, auf meine Gegner. Und ich probiere wirklich alles zu geben, dass ich das Spiel gewinnen kann am Freitag. Und fokussiere mich voll auf das.
Well, he's obviously quite nervous, but he wants to have fun out there on the stage, and he's looking forward to play his opponents, and he will try to play his best game, his A game, and like to take as much with him as possible, and he's definitely looking forward for that experience for the first time on the big stage.
Marcel's name has cropped up more and more regularly over the last 9 months or so, having a lot of success on the SDC circuit since the SDC Tour launched last summer. But before then, can he talk us through his history in darts? When and how did he discover the game?
Ich habe angefangen vor 11 Jahren. Habe mit dem E-Dart angefangen. Ich bin immer ein E-Darter gewesen. Ab und zu mal Stil-Dart gespielt. Ich habe an einer Bar gearbeitet und da sind immer wieder Turniere stattgefunden. Und danach haben sie mich gefragt, ob ich da mitspielen will. Und dann habe ich gesagt, ja, okay, mal machen mit, ja. Und da hat es mich vom ersten Pfeilen weg hat's mich gepackt. Und und das hat mich richtig gepusht.
Well, he started 11 years ago with playing darts with e-darts, and he worked at a bar, and there was like local teams, and they asked Marcel if he wants to join, and he said yes, why not? And from the first start, he fell in love from the very first start with the sport, and since then he played hard, twice, steel dart, and that's it.
And as we mentioned, the SDC Tour launched last summer and it's brought a more professional setup for tournaments in Switzerland. Before we talk about his results in those events, what was his first impression of the SDC and seeing what they were going to be providing for the players?
Ich bin happy gewesen, dass endlich etwas läuft in der Schweiz, wo für Dartspieler ist. Dass mit dem SDC nochmal richtig Push in die Schweizer Dart-Geschichte reinkommt. Und ich habe mich riesig gefreut, dass ich einmal auf Steel Dart wechseln kann. Steel Dart tue ich eigentlich erst seit dem August so richtig intensiv, letztes Jahr August. Und wo das danach vom SDC ist gekommen, das hat mich richtig gepusht und ich habe mir können sagen, genau das ist mein Moment zum Zuschlagen.
He was really happy when he heard about it, and he thought like that's what Switzerland needs now, like someone who pushes the darts in Switzerland, and he was like, that's now the perfect moment to switch from e-darts to steel darts, and he was just excited, and he thinks that it's really something for the players, what SDC offers, and that's why he joined the SDC Tour.
And we mentioned to Mark earlier about the Euro Tour coming to Switzerland next year, a sign of the growth in Swiss darts over the last few years. How would Marcel assess the dart scene in Switzerland right now? Is the interest and participation growing?
Ich sage, es ist extrem am Wachsen, und zwar eben aus dem Grund vom SDC. Der SDC bringt den Sport richtig uns in der Schweiz. Und das freut mich extrem. Das ist absolut genial, was jetzt da in der Schweiz passiert. Mit Stefan Belmont, der jetzt gute Resultate hat erspielt. Jetzt kann ich da noch mithelfen. European Tour kann spielen, Challenge Tour spielen. Und das ist sicher sehr, sehr gut für den Schweizer Dartsport. Und ich sage es nochmal, eben der SDC ist schon auf absolut gutem Weg, wo der Schweizer Dartsport recht stark kann fördern.
He says that their interest of people in darts will rise or is rising in Switzerland mainly because of the SDC. And obviously also he mentioned Stefan Belmont, like his victories on Euro Tour and on Challenger Tour as well. And he thinks like the STC will push the knowledge of darts in Switzerland for the next years. And that's it.
Good to hear. Well, let's get on to those results. And Marcel won the first 3 events on the STC Tour, ended up finishing last year with 4 titles, and then he won 2 more this year. Did those results surpass his expectations, or was he confident that he could have all of that success straight away?
Nee, das hat meine Erwartungen schon übertroffen. Weil ich bin schon ein ehrgeiziger Mensch, und wenn ich an ein Dart-Turnier gehe, dann will ich das gewinnen. Aber dass ich gerade in der ersten Saison 6 Turniere kann gewinnen, das hat schon alles übertroffen. Ja.
He says that it surpassed his expectations, even though he's like a very ambitious person, but he never thought of winning like 6 events in one season. And
Well, those wins helped Marcel top the STC rankings, get that free entry to Q School at the start of this year. And looking at his results, he made it through the first stage, and in the final stage, a run to the last 16 on that final day. How did he reflect on that first time playing at Q School?
Also, ich bin sehr, sehr zufrieden. Ich habe niemals gedacht, dass ich in die Final Stage komme. Ich habe mir kein Ziel gesetzt. Ich habe gesagt, ich nehme das mit, was kommt. Aber rückblickend muss ich sagen, ich bin extrem glücklich über das Resultat. Aber das nächste Jahr wird es ganz sicher probieren zu toppen. Weil ich mache Schritt für Schritt immer vorwärts, und jetzt weiss ich, was auf mich zukommt, und ich probiere weiter zu kämpfen und weiter vorne dabei mitzuspielen, und ich werde das schaffen.
He said that he didn't expect to make the final stage, and that he was very excited to play Q School, obviously the first time. And he had like the mindset of going there with I take whatever comes, whatever opponent I get, and he hopes to even top it the next year to get the tour card, obviously. And that's like what he said.
Fingers crossed for that. Well, after Q School, we saw Marcel start to play on the Challenge Tour as well, making that trip over to the UK a couple of times, and the most recent of those trips only a couple of weeks ago, going all the way to the semi-finals in one of the events. What did that run mean to him?
Ja, es war sicher eine grosse Bedeutung für mich, dass ich das geschafft habe. Aber Halbfinale ist nicht das Ziel. Das Ziel ist ganz sicher das Finale. Und ich nehme da meine Lehre daraus. Ich lehre von Turnier zu Turnier. Und das ist noch nicht das Ziel gewesen, das ich erreichen will. Aber es pusht mich sicher immer vorwärts, wenn ich so gute Resultate erzielen kann. Und es macht einfach Spaß, wenn es funktioniert.
Well, he's obviously very happy about reaching the semi-final, but like his goal is the final, or even to win a Challenger Tour. And he will take out the lessons from the tournament, from the Challenger Tour, and he tries to improve every tournament he plays. And he thinks there is still more to come in the future.
Good to hear. Well, it was a busy week last week. You had those Euro Tour qualifiers. You also had the SDC Tour finals where you made it to the semi-finals. But I wanted to ask you about the SDC awards. You won the Player of the Year, the Players Player of the Year, and we saw the video on YouTube. You were emotional when you received the awards. What did you say in your speech for our English listeners?
Also ganz sicher eben ein grosses Dankeschön an die STC, dass die ganze Tour hat auf die Beine gestellt, und dass ich mich bei allen zusammen bedankt, wo hinter mir stehen, wo mir helfen, den Weg zu gehen. Es ist einfach emotional, es ist einfach gerade extrem überwältigend gewesen für mich. Die ganze Saison oder der ganze Aufstieg hat sich wie soll ich sagen, hat sich gelohnt. die Arbeit auf mich zu nehmen, für das zu erreichen.
First of all, he thanked the STC for like setting out the whole tour, and obviously like all his friends, family, girlfriend, like for supporting him all the time. And yeah, he was like it was very emotional because he thought of like what he all needed to get that rise that he had last season, and like all the hard work, and I think that's what made him emotional in that moment.
Well, at the time of recording, the Swiss team for the PDC World Cup hasn't been announced yet, but that's an event that was first held in 2010 and was won by Raymond van Barneveld and a gentleman who I think you've got a resemblance to in Swiss Stompe. Has anyone mentioned this to you before?
Nee, bis jetzt noch nie. Nee.
He says that no one ever has like said that he reminds him of Swiss Stompe, or that he looks like of Swiss Stompe. Apart from you, Alex, I guess.
I was going to say, yeah, I've given you the nickname of the Swiss Stompe, and Co. When he would win a match on stage, he'd pull out the crane celebration, raise both arms in the air, one leg in the air. Would you consider doing the crane if you win on Friday for us?
Ob ich das für ihn würde machen?
Ja, so in dieser Art am Freitag, ja, oder halt allgemein, ja.
Ja, wenn mir das in dem Moment in den Sinn kommt, dann mache ich das sehr gerne.
Good. He says that if it's still in his head on Friday when he wins that match, then he will do the celebration for you, Alex.
Happy days. I've got my fingers crossed. Well, just lastly, before we let you guys go, beyond the Euro Tour this weekend, hopefully we'll see that celebration, but what have you got your eye on for the rest of the year? Is it going to be focusing on the SDC Tour, the Challenge Tour, and then having a go at Q School again next year?
Ja, jetzt fängt die neue STC-Tour an und mein Fokus ist ganz sicher da, wieder vorher mit der Wirt spielen. Ich weiss, dass da von Deutschland, von Holland Leute werden mitspielen und der Fokus ist ganz sicher auf der STC-Tour, aber ich habe noch 2 Events mit der Challenge-Tour jetzt dieses Jahr, wo ich ganz sicher noch spiele. Und ja, ich nehme eins nach dem anderen. Also der nächste Fokus ist ganz sicher auf den Freitag. Dann, wenn es mir reicht, für einen World Cup of Dart. Also ich nehme wirklich eins nach dem anderen, aber
he says that he is looking forward to the STC tour, to the upcoming STC tour starting in 3 weeks, and as well he plans to play another 2 challenge tour weekends, and if he is part of it, obviously the World Cup of Darts, and and then Q School in January, and he takes step by step, and then he sees what victory it brings.
Excellent. Well, gents, it's a pleasure to chat to the both of you. Mark, thank you very much for helping with the translation, and Marcel, thank you very much for your time, and we wish you all the best for this weekend, that Euro Tour debut, and we've got our fingers crossed we're going to see that special celebration as well from the Swiss Stompe.
Cheers, mate. No problem.
Thanks so much.
Thanks again to Marcel for joining us, Sam. We'll finish up the show with some listener questions. We've got 3 to answer. The first one comes from Charlie Gray. Says, what do you and Burton think about the DRA rule about dart points going into effect for next year?
I won't bother reading the entire rule for everyone, but if anyone's curious, it is the new DRA rule 5.1.2, so you can look it up yourself and try to make sense of it. There's a lot of numbers and measurements in there, but in essence, it would, I believe, ban like Simon Whitlock's homemade points and something that other people have now been using. It might ban some other things. I don't. I like, and I remember them talking about it on the Euro Tour earlier this year, right after the rule got announced. And I think the key thing was that they didn't put it into immediate effect. They gave it a year so that players could get adjusted. Players like Whitlock who are playing with those points, they could continue to use them this year, or they could try changing this year and seeing how it goes and adjusting their game and giving yourself that time to adjust. But I'm not fully sold on it being the right call. Yes, it obviously beats up the board, but I wasn't noticing much to show that it was beating up the board quickly enough that it was affecting games. I wasn't seeing darts fall out at a disproportionate level because the boards were getting beat up. Obviously, I'm not good enough, but if I had that kind of accuracy and I was throwing like that on my home board, it would much quicker get damaged to the point that I can't use it. But the PDC, like on the television matches, they change boards every match, and some of the longer matches you might see a board change mid-match. Players Championships, they don't, it might get beat up over the course of the day, but at some point you can change out the board, and I think that's the more right call. I don't think it was making that much of a difference on the board to merit it, because we were seeing darts bounce out even when players are playing with points that are not, or at least I don't think are going to be banned. I do sympathize with Whitlock here. I think he's been made a scapegoat for a problem that wasn't really a problem, and I think this is a solution as a result in search of a problem, and therefore I don't agree with it.
Yeah, I think this new rule that's coming in next year kind of feels like, for me, it's a little bit too late, because I think back to when, towards the end of the unicorn era in the PDC, if you like, before they switched over to the win more boards. And I remember some matches involving Simon Whitlock. This was around 2020, 2021 time, and you'd look on Twitter during a Simon Whitlock match on TV, and it would be full of comments about how badly the board was looking after a few minutes and after the first break. So for me, it does feel like this rule has come in maybe a little bit too late, but at the same time, there is no getting away from the fact that if you are playing someone who's got points that significantly damage the board quicker, you've got to adjust to that environment, haven't you? You're not throwing a clean board or as close to a clean board as you're used to. And I think that's the reason you mentioned it there, that the PDC changed the boards on TV after every match. It is to give, not just for us looking at the game, the best aesthetically pleasing view of the board, but also for the players as well, to give them the best environment to play in. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see this rule implemented when it comes in next year. And I can see it kind of being like in football, when the players come out to play, you've got the linesman or the referee, they're checking the players' studs on their boots before the game. Now you can have a referee or an official inspecting the points on the players' darts to decide if they fit the criteria and the rules that they're bringing in. So I think for some players, and you touched on it there, that are going to fall foul of these new rules with the points, but their points hardly do anything to the board, then they're going to feel hard done by, I guess. But I think when you're talking about the professional side of the game, you can't really have any vagueness in the rules. You've either got to go all in on this or not. So yeah, like I said, I feel like this has maybe come 2 years too late, but at the same time, it is good that we are going to have that definitive set of rules with regards to what the players can and can't use going forward.
Now, second question. This comes from Vincent van Genechten. I probably mispronounced that, and I apologize. But has Johnny Clayton become the best big finisher in the game at this point? I think last week we mentioned that he's the best 25 finisher in the world, but is he also the best big finisher?
Well, firstly, apologies for setting up the list of questions like that, so I had the easy names to pronounce. But yeah, there was a tweet from our friends at Darts Oracle with they had a list of the last 10 years of the Premier League, who's had the highest checkout percentage. And this year, you guessed it, Johnny Clayton, top of that list with 44%. So going off of that, you would say he's the best finisher. And I think for me, when I'm watching darts, there are some players, you get the feeling that when they step up to the oche, they've got a ton plus finish, or one of those finishes, I don't know, between maybe 80 and 100, where you might only get one dart at a double, single 20 tops, or you're ending up with one dart at the bull after a couple of singles. You do feel like they are more likely to hit it. And Johnny Clayton, for me, is one of those players. You go back to last week in the Premier League, that big game against Nathan Aspinall, lost it. Nathan Aspinall had that 103 average, won it 6-1. The leg that Johnny Clayton did win, he had a 160 finish. So it shows you that he is pretty good when it comes to the big finishes, even when he's not performing at his best. And we had Johnny on the show last month, and he said that finishing is something that he works on and practices on a lot. And that's someone that, by his own admission, hates practicing, very rarely practices. But before matches in particular, he'll be throwing at the ball because, as he said, it can come into play at times. It might only be once or twice in a match where you'll throw for the ball, but if you get one of those shots, it could be a key moment. And Johnny Clayton, I think we've seen since his rise in the last few years, his finishing has come to the fore a lot more. I think back to that Masters in 2021, his first singles major, that quarterfinal with James Wade, he was 91% in a best of 19 leg game on the finishing. That's where it really said to me, wow, he is one of the best finishers. And on his day, okay, it's not every day, but I think there's a big enough sample size to say that over the last few years he has proved himself that he is one of the best finishers in the game.
Well, it's been a few years, I'm going to guess, since the last time I mentioned this, but I remember in the early seasons, especially when we first saw Johnny Clayton emerging, when he won that Euro Tour 5 years ago now, his first big stage title, and obviously then followed it in win the 4 majors in 2020. I mentioned that in 2016, when I was trying some advanced statistics out and came up with a ranking for players on their finishing, Johnny Clayton that year was number 2 in the world in terms of his finishing relative to everyone else, behind only Michael van Gerwen. And he was closer to NVG than he was for whoever was number 3. And I can't for the life of me remember who number 3 was. I have it on a spreadsheet somewhere. But Johnny Clayton was the second best finisher in the world, and it was a clear-cut top 2. And if you think back to 2016, no one really knew who he was. Yes, he would go on, he would upset Gerwyn Price, who also had emerged that year in the World Championships. Little did we know we were soon going to be we would be seeing a preview of Premier League semifinal from 7 years later when those two met at the World Championships. But no one knew who Johnny Clayton was then. I thought maybe there was something wrong with my formula. And I should have, my formula only took into account matches on stage, because at that point we didn't have Dart Connect. So we didn't know what was going on in the Players' Championship events. But across the Euro Tour, across the televised majors, he was number 2. So this is not a new phenomenon. He has always been a really good finisher. And what I think was letting him down at the beginning of this year was that his finishing regressed a little bit in the first month of the season. But now that his finishing is back, now that he's just back to being the Johnny Clayton that he was even before anyone knew who Johnny Clayton was, we see just how good he is and how he holds his nerve, how he holds his bottle, and how if you give him a shot at 116, if you give him a shot at 130, if you give him a shot at 161, he might not hit it, but he's more likely to hit each one of those shots than pretty much anyone else in the world is in that same situation. That's why I think, yes, he is the best big finisher in the world, just as he was even before we knew who he was.
And our final listener question comes from Philip Davies. This is one more suited to you, Burton. Out of the 8 North American players that have qualified, who do you think is the one the PDC representatives will most want to avoid drawing in the US Darts Masters next week?
Yeah, and it's a bit weird. The defending champion Leonard Gates failed to qualify for this, although he will represent the U.S. at the World Cup in a couple weeks' time. So the field is Jeff Smith, Matt Campbell, Jules Van Dongen, all 3 of them being the tour card holders. They're joined by Alex Spellman, Jim Long, and then 3 players who won through qualifiers last weekend, Jason Brandon, JT Davis, and Jake McMillan. A lot of J's there between Jeff, Jules, Jim, Jason, JT, and Jake. I don't know what Matt and Alex are doing there. Of those 8, I have to say Matt Campbell. I mean, he's been really darn good. He's in line to qualify for the World Championships again. As I said at the beginning of this show, I think he's a player who will win a title. Obviously, last year, early on in the year, made it to a final out of nowhere. But I think he's a much better player now than he was then, and he was able to make a final then. But of the ones who don't have tour cards, I'll also say Alex Spellman. At least one Alex is good at darts, and that's Alex Spellman. I think he's a player that we will see have a good run of it at Q School in the coming years. I think he's a player who can make it onto the tour. Haven't seen as much of him yet, but that will change. So I'll go 1 Canadian, 1 American as the 2, and those are Campbell and Spellman. The only 2 that aren't names beginning with J.
Yeah, I've got to say, I was having a look through that list of names earlier, and spoiler alert, I'm going to go with the same there. But I know there's been some talk on social media about some of the names missing from this lineup of North American players at Madison Square Garden next week. You mentioned it there, the defending champion Leonard Gates didn't qualify, neither did Danny Lauby Jr., Danny Baggish, even David Cameron, who we've seen have some success on the TV in the last year or so. But you have got 3 tour card holders in there. You've got Jeff Smith, Matt Campbell, who you mentioned, Jules Van Dongen, and I'm with you, like on current form, Matt Campbell is the one to avoid. And after that, Alex Spellman, who I'll come back to in a moment, he won the CDC Continental Cup last year. We've seen him play a lot in terms of Q School at the Modus League this year. And even at the weekend, he won one of the CDC events, and he had some decent averages in there. There was a lot of high 90s, sometimes into the early hundreds in there as well. So the form for him as well is looking pretty good. But I'll give a mention to the unknown names, if you like, and these are 3 players that won those last 3 spots in the field via the qualifiers at the weekend. All of them are going to be making their TV debuts next week in New York. And Jason Brandon, who was the winner of the first qualifier, looking at his results, and it's fair to say that he got better and better as the day went on. And when you think you get to that finishing line when it is basically win and you're in, or lose and all that hard work goes out the window, that's when the pressure can come in. But you get to the last 2 rounds, he beats Danny Baggish 5-4 in the semi-finals, and then in the final beats Jake McMillan, who'd go on to get that spot via the Order of Merit, beats him with a 95, close to a 96 average. So that tells me that he's got something about him. He can perform pretty well when it comes to those pressure moments. But again, it's very different from a qualifier to then adjusting to the bright lights, the big stage at Madison Square Garden next week. So it's hard to pick one of those players. So like you, I'm going to go with those 2, Matt Campbell and Alex Spellman. And yeah, I think Alex Spellman, he is the wild card from those 8 players. And I think if you're one of the 8 PDC players that's been invited, you've got to do your homework, because if you don't and you think, oh, I've not really heard of Alex Spellman before, you could come unstuck. And again, I think he's someone that is going to be among the favourites for that North American Championship. And again, if he wins that Grand Slam, Ali Pali, he could go on to do what Leonard Gates has done and really open a lot of doors for him.
Well, that'll be next week, but anything else for this week?
Well, we have to say a big thank you to our guests for joining us, to Michael, to Rod, to Marcel for their time, and shout out to Dave Allen at the PDC for fitting us in as part of the Premier League Media Day and getting that chat with Michael earlier. Thank you to our sponsor, Dartwolf, for their continued support. If you want more Dynamite Darts content, head on over to dartwolf.tv. Give Dartwolf a follow on Twitter as well, at Dartwolf180. And we should be back next week. It's an important week for North American darts with that US Darts Masters back at Madison Square Garden. And we'll be back to preview that. Plus, we'll be reviewing the Premier League playoffs, the Euro Tour from this weekend as well. We'll see if Marcel Walpen, if he wins his game, will he do the crane celebration like he's promised, if he remembers to do it. It's going to be another busy show next week. Lots of darts to enjoy. That's all you've got to do. Plenty of events to sit back and watch. So until then, make sure you enjoy the darts.
Yes, indeed. It's a great time for darts with all the televised events over the next 2 months. There'll be a lot of enjoying to do. You just have to hang tight for 7 more days. Thanks, as Alex said, to Dartwolf and to all of our guests and listeners. And we'll be back next week. Hang tight until then.